Welcome to this explainer. When we think of Norse mythology, our brains almost instantly jump to Odin, right? The all-knowing, one-eyed wanderer pulling all the cosmic strings. But if we actually dig into the earliest source material, the foundations of the cosmos were definitely not laid by a solo architect. Today, we're bringing two absolutely crucial, yet totally unsung heroes out from the shadows. Odin's forgotten brothers, Vili and Vé.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with the brothers of the All-Father, then move on to forging the Norse universe, the first human beings, the meaning behind names, and finally wrap up with some serious divine drama and betrayal.
All right, Section 1, Brothers of the All-Father, the Unsung Architects. Let's start with the ultimate question about the origins of the Norse pantheon. So, who actually helped Odin build reality? We all know the All-Father, but what if I told you he totally didn't construct the cosmos alone? It's kind of a huge misconception that Odin was this solitary creator deity, and that mostly happens because his brothers kind of just fade into the background in later myths. But the foundational texts? They tell a wildly different story. Tracing their primeval roots back to the literal dawn of time, we find Borr, the grandfather of the gods. And get this, he was actually licked out of salty ice blocks by a primeval cow. Yep, Borr then had a son named Borr. Borr marries the giantess Bestla, daughter of the giant Bothorn. And together, Borr and Bestla have 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Vé. So this makes our trio the absolute first generation of the Aesir, the main pantheon in Norse religion. Odin's the eldest, Vili's in the middle, and Vé is the youngest. Moving right along to Section 2, Forging the Norse Universe, Slaying the Primeval Giant. Let's see how this family tree translates into physical construction. Because being the very first gods meant they had a massively monumental task right out of the gate. Dealing with the chaotic primordial forces that came before them. According to the Gylfaginning in Snorri Sturluson's Prose Edda, the 3 brothers literally banded together for an unimaginably brutal job. They took down the primeval giant Ymir, decisively ending the age of the chaotic giants. But they didn't just stop at slaying him. They went full cosmic architect. They used Ymir's remains to build the entire universe. His flesh became the earth, his bones became the mountains, and his skull? That became the sky. It was a complete joint effort. Honestly, without Vili and Vé, there simply is no Midgard. Section 3. The First Human Beings, Crafting Ask and Embla. And their architectural work didn't just stop with cosmic real estate. They actually created humanity itself. The story goes that while wandering along the newly formed seashore, the 3 brothers stumbled across 2 trees, Ask and Embla. They looked at these unthinking wooden logs and decided to shape them into the very first human beings. And what's really brilliant here is how they split up the work of building human consciousness and physical form. Odin gave them a soul and the breath of life. But hey, a living, breathing log isn't exactly human yet, right? So Vili steps in. He bestows wit, intelligence, and the sense of touch, basically giving them cognition. Finally, Vé steps up and gives them their human countenance, their physical appearance, alongside speech, hearing, and sight. It's just this perfect, harmonious triad of creation. Section 4, the meaning behind names, the evolving mythos. Now, as with any ancient mythology, historical texts can be a bit messy. The names and identities of these brothers mysteriously shift depending on which manuscript you're reading. While Snorri's Prose Edda very clearly calls them Vili and Vé, the famous poem Völuspá describes the exact same creation of humans, but swaps the brothers' names out for Honir and Lodur. Since Snorri was super familiar with the Völuspá, scholars generally agree that Honir is just another name for Vili and Lodur is another name for Vé. It really highlights just how fluid these oral traditions were before someone finally wrote them down. So, let's decode their primary names to figure out what these guys actually represent. Starting with the middle brother, Vili. In Old Norse, Vili transparently and literally translates to will or wish. This stems straight from the Proto-Germanic root veljon. Think about it. When Vili gives humanity wit and intelligence, he's basically personifying internal thought. He is the cognition, the desire, and that mental willpower that actually drives a person to take action. Then we have the youngest brother, Vé. His name directly translates to sanctuary or holy.
It's totally connected to the Gothic word for priest and comes from a Proto-Germanic word meaning holy. Actually, a related noun form even survives in place names today, where Vé literally means a physical sanctuary or temple. So if Vili represents our internal will, Vé represents Numen, that immense spiritual power residing out there in the external sacred world. The really crucial takeaway here is that in Proto-Norse, their original alliterating names, Wodenas, Willio, and Vihes, form a complete, perfectly functioning psychological triad. You've got Odin representing transcendent inspiration and prophetic knowledge. Then Vili brings the internal cognition and the sheer will to act on that knowledge. And finally, Vé provides the external spiritual power and the sanctuary to manifest it all. Put them together, and you get a complete, unified picture of Germanic spiritual philosophy. Pretty wild, right? Okay, Section 5, Divine Drama and Betrayal, Rulers in the Shadows. Let's pivot from high-level philosophy to some downright scandalous history. Because these brothers weren't just abstract concepts, they were highly active, super ambitious characters. According to several sources, Odin was known to wander off. A lot. Once, he traveled abroad for a really, really long time. So long, in fact, that the other Azir just assumed he was gone for good. And, well, nature abhors a vacuum, and so does divine politics. Vili and Vé stepped right out of the shadows to govern the realm in his place. They started dividing up their older brother's massive inheritance. But they didn't just stop at his lands and treasures. There's this absolutely astonishing quote from Chapter 3 of Snorri's Heimskringla that reveals the ultimate betrayal. It says of Vili and Vé, but his wife Frigg they shared between them. Yeah, you heard that right. They essentially took over everything that was Odin's, including his wife. This was a massive scandal. The trickster god Loki even weaponized this exact affair in the poem Lokasenna just to mock Frigg. Now, obviously, as the quote notes, Odin eventually came back, took possession of his wife again, and resumed absolute rule. But still, what a story. This whole overlapping identity thing, where the brothers can just seamlessly step into Odin's shoes and even share his wife, has sparked some incredibly fascinating academic theories. Scholar R. Kieser proposed that Vili and Vé aren't actually completely separate entities at all. Instead, he interprets them as parts of a Germanic trinity. In this view, spirit, will, and holiness are basically blended together into one giant, all-embracing world spirit that we just call Odin. And that brings this explainer to a pretty profound mystery for us to ponder. Were Vili and Vé genuinely distinct deities who physically stood right beside Odin to slay giants and carve humans out of driftwood? Or are they simply linguistic and psychological fragments of one single, highly complex, all-fathering spirit? Either way, their presence lingering in the shadows of the Norse mythos is a great reminder that even the All-Father needed a little will and sanctuary to build a universe. Thanks so much for exploring this with me. Keep asking questions, keep digging into the history, and we'll catch you next time.